Okay, welcome everyone uh, to this week's workshop, which is Listen with Confidence, which is part of the Communicate with Confidence workshop series. It's workshop 2 of 4. And the workshop today is brought to you by the Academic Success Center. So what is the goal of today's workshop? Today, today's workshop is to share listening strategies to help you maximize your listening and increase your participation in your college classes. And this is all in order to help you build your confidence in a variety of academic listening situations. So this is what we will cover today. Um, we'll look at some of the challenges of listening in a college setting. We'll look at the listening process. So we'll look at pre-listening strategies, while listening strategies, and post-listening strategies. And we'll finish up today by looking at a few resources that are available through the Academic Success Center. Okay, so why is listening difficult in college settings? What expectations will there be for listening in your college program? The listening expectations may include, but are not limited to, focusing on lectures despite physical and personal distractions. Also, maintaining concentration while listening to multiple lectures, covering a variety of topics every day. Listening to information about unfamiliar topics, including new vocabulary and new concepts. Following a speaker who digresses or goes off topic, and knowing when to stop taking notes and begin taking notes again, relating to the lecture content. And finally, adapting to variations in voice volume, enunciation, speed, and accents. So I mentioned earlier that listening is a process. So we're going to spend the next few minutes looking at this idea of listening as a process. So rather than listening or thinking of listening as a one-time event, I'd like to encourage you to think of listening as a process with stages. There are things you can do before you listen, while you listen, and after you listen to maximize your listening. So let's look at some strategies that you can use before you listen. And I know what you're thinking. You're probably thinking, why would I take time before I go to class to prepare to listen to a lecture, for example? Or I barely have time to attend my lectures without any additional time that I would need to take to prepare for attending a lecture. However, pre-listening strategies will help you understand information better while listening and will help you retain that information better after listening as well. So preparing to listen to new information can save you time later. Students rarely take the time to prepare to listen in class. However, we feel that this is a significant, can make a significant difference if you take some time before you go to class to prepare to listen. So what strategies can you use to prepare to listen to a lecture, for example? You can write down everything you already know about the topic. So for example, if you know that tomorrow's topic there's a new topic that the instructor will be speaking on in tomorrow's class. The day before, you can write down everything you already know about that topic, do some brainstorming in advance to sort of see what you already know. You can review any materials that are provided. So often instructors will provide topic information in your Learn course. So you can preview it in advance. And finally, looking up new vocabulary words. If there are new words that you're not familiar with, take some time to look up those words and make a note of the meanings of those words. And one final tip here in terms of pre-listening, make a plan to avoid distractions. So if you're working to prepare for tomorrow's lecture or next week's lecture, for example, we all get distracted. And my tip for you would be to plan for that inevitability. We all get distracted by our physical environments and other things that are on our minds. So how can you avoid these distractions, predict the distractions, and make a plan? Are you often distracted by your phone? What can you do to avoid that? Maybe you can leave your phone in a different room, and so on. So make a plan to avoid these distractions and try to stick to it as you're preparing to listen. So to sum up, why is it important to include pre-listening strategies into your routine? To connect the material with what you already know on the topic, to identify gaps in your knowledge, and to set yourself up for success by creating an environment that will allow you to prepare properly in advance of listening. So which pre-listening strategies would you like to build into your routine? Okay, let's move on and talk a little bit about some of the strategies that you could consider using while you're listening. So you've prepared for the lecture by checking the class topic on the course outline, reading the assigned pages from your textbook, or looking up new vocabulary and making notes. And perhaps you've even put a do not disturb sign on your door and possibly left your phone in another space so that it's not a distraction for you. Now it's time to go to class and to listen to the lecture. Here are some strategies that you can use while you listen. So certainly you want to take notes while you're listening to that lecture. Taking notes engages us in the content, right? The act of taking notes itself connects us with the speaker, what the speaker is saying, and what they're talking about. And it really helps us engage with the material. And we actually start to learn it. You start the process of learning through the act of taking notes. So a very important part of attending a lecture and listening is taking notes. We also want to consider the topic in context. So ask yourself, why is the instructor talking about this particular topic at this point in the course? What topics have we already covered earlier in the course? What topics will be coming next, right? So placing the current topic of the lecture in the larger context of the course and asking yourself, why is the instructor talking about this at this point, right? There's a reason, there's an order to the topics that are covered, and instructors think carefully about that order. Often topics build on one another. So the current topic is most likely building on previous information, right? And or preparing us and leading us into the next topic, right? Making sure we have an understanding of the material before we move on to the next topic. Also, we want to listen for main ideas. Okay, so what are some ways that we can listen for main ideas? Instructors often introduce the main idea of a lecture at the very beginning of the class. In the same way that we would introduce the main idea of a topic in an essay or a research paper or even a paragraph, right? Providing that topic sentence at the beginning of a paragraph or that thesis statement at the beginning of an essay or a research paper. Instructors organize their ideas in a way that they hope is logical, both to them and to their students. And this often begins with introducing the main idea at the beginning of the course. So being in class right at the beginning of class is super important, or you might miss the big idea. And then instructors will often end the class by summarizing the most important ideas or the key concepts that they hope their students will remember. So sticking around until the end of the class is also important, right? Not leaving early. And then, of course, listening throughout the lecture, listening for cues, and notice how the instructor is sharing their feelings about the topic. Are they repeating certain ideas, right? As humans, when we repeat things in general, it's because we're trying to emphasize an idea or trying to make a particular point. And we do this, I think, naturally through repetition, right? And some instructors may not even realize that they're repeating ideas throughout a lecture. But if they are, that is a signal to you that that is an important point. That is a main idea. That is something the instructor hopes that you'll remember and take away from the lecture. And finally, it's super important to ask questions in the moment. If the instructor mentions something and you're not clear on it, make sure you ask. Ask for clarification. Ask for your instructor to explain something in a different way if you're not understanding their first attempt at explaining an idea. If it's a complicated concept, it's helpful to hear it being explained in a different way, possibly. So super important, ask questions in class. Instructors appreciate when their students ask questions. It tells them that their students are paying attention to what they're talking about. And it helps them feel like they are connecting with the people that are listening to them. So to sum up, why is it important to practice these while listening strategies? They help us to learn the material efficiently. Okay, so by taking notes, engaging with the content, starting to do some of that learning while we're listening, by writing high quality notes that will help us review and study that information. So writing notes is important, and capturing those main ideas as we're hearing our instructors present ideas, trying to capture those key ideas, and connecting those main ideas to our previous understanding of the topic, and the overall structure of the course. Again, thinking about why is this information being presented at this point in the course, right? There's a reason why that information is being presented at that particular time, right? Often building on previous topics and preparing us to learn new ideas as we move forward. So again, something to think about. Which while listening strategies do you think would be helpful for you as you continue with your college classes? Okay, so moving on to the last stage of the listening process, right? So we've been talking about how we want to think about listening not as a one-time event, but as a process. Things that we can do before we listen, during listening, and perhaps most importantly, after we listen. So let's talk a little bit about what are some strategies we can use after we listen to a lecture. So classes are finished for the day, time to close your laptop and books, right? Not quite yet. As I mentioned, very important part of the listening process is to apply some post-listening strategies. So let's have a look at these. Number one, summarize what you heard in class before too much time has passed. Okay, so maybe you want to stay on campus at the end of a busy day of classes, find a quiet space, either in the library or somewhere else on campus, sit down and try to summarize any new ideas that were shared with you that day in your courses. You can do that in writing. Okay, looking at your notes, right? You have taken notes in class. I suggested that you engage with the lecture by taking notes. Have a look at your notes, review the notes, and often when we make notes, they're not maybe terribly organized in the moment that we're making them because we're listening and trying to take notes at the same time. So after school is a great time to review those notes and to try to organize them a little bit better. Another helpful way that we can process what we've heard, and which is part of the listening process, is to summarize ideas verbally. So a great idea would be to meet with a classmate at the end of the day and agree to summarize what you believe are the most important points that were shared with you during your classes with a classmate, for example. That would be a very effective piece of the listening process, right? Even though the listening has been completed, you can, by summarizing and reviewing those ideas and either writing those ideas in your own words or verbally sharing those ideas in conversation with a classmate, for example, can be very effective way to begin that process of moving your learning from your short-term memory to your long-term memory. I know that for me, I've realized that an effective way for me to learn something is to be able, and for me to know when I've learned it, when I've really learned it, is to be able to teach it to somebody else. If I can teach somebody an idea or explain a concept to somebody else, I know that I have truly learned it. Until I get to that point where I can explain an idea to someone clearly and effectively, I really haven't learned it. So that verbal summary is a good step along that path to, really understanding an idea and moving it from our short-term memories to our long-term memories. And then secondly, part of post-listening, I believe, is to look for answers to your questions. So if you had questions in class and they weren't answered, or maybe you made a note to ask the question, follow up on it later, that day, try to answer those questions, or don't put it off too long. Ask a classmate or even send an email perhaps to your instructor and say, hey, there was something I meant to ask in class today, didn't have a chance. Here's my question. So often by doing that quick follow-up can be helpful as part of the post-listening process. Okay, and finally, I just wanted to add a tip to this post listening piece, which is you may not have time to write your summary in perfect paragraph or perfect grammar. It doesn't matter, right? Find a way to write a summary of those notes in a format that works best for you. It could also be a mind map. Some people are visual. I wouldn't necessarily choose to use a mind map, but you could use something that looks like this. Um, if your brain works in sort of visual ways and you learn things more as a visual learner, I know many people's brains work this way, then it could be really helpful for you to produce these ideas or to recreate these ideas and these notes by using some sort of a mind map or mind web. Okay, so just to sum up this final stage of listening, in terms of the post listening, why is it important to practice these post listening strategies? One reason is to review material soon after we learn it, again, to move that knowledge from our short-term memories to our long-term memories, to create summaries that work well for you and to help you review that material later, because you, of course, will need to come back to that information later to prepare for a quiz or a test, an exam, and so on. And finally, to identify gaps in your understanding so that you can ask for help and fill some of those gaps, right? So if on the day immediately after class, you sit down with your notes from class, you will realize if there are some missing pieces that you need to follow up on. And that's can be super important as well. So again, which post listening strategies would you like to try of the ones that I've mentioned here today? Okay, so just like this, sum up the workshop today. And what we've been looking at is this idea of not thinking about listening in school as a one-time event, but rather thinking of it as a process. What can we do before class to help us prepare to get the most out of the information that's being shared with us in class? What can we do while we're in class, while we're listening? And then finally, what can we do after class to help us process that information and again, make the most of the information and to really set ourselves up for success as we move forward in the course and prepare to demonstrate our learning through the different assessments and evaluations that we'll be asked to do. And these strategies can help maximize what we get from our listening, and in addition, they can help us feel like we're participating and we're engaging more in the class when we think of listening as a process.